Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. It's a special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Marin Community College District. It's a public hearing for purposes of discussing our redistricting stages that we will be going through. Before we adopt the agenda, I would like to request that on behalf of President Kuhn, who made the suggestion that we adjourn in memory of Tom Place, who was a 30-year faculty member in the math department, who recently passed, and David shared his obituary with us. So with the adjournment addition, I don't believe there's any other changes to the agenda. Is that right, David? No other changes? Okay, so, thank you. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move.
Motion by Long, second by Crow, I saw. That's okay. All right. Okay, roll call, please, Diana.
Trustee Crow,
Yes.
Trustee da Silva. You're muted.
Unmute, yes, yes.
All right. Trustee Cranenberg,
Here.
Trustee Long,
Aye.
is Trustee Yoshihara here?
No.
Trustee Conti, aye. Trustee Trainer.
Hi, thank you. I don't believe we've received in advance any public comment. Are there any public comments to be presented at this meeting? Seeing none, correct? I believe now what I need to do is open the public hearing on the Marin Community College District redistricting process.
We'll first have the presentation.
But that's the study session, right? Oh, I see. So I thought we opened the public hearing in the study session. No?
Let me double check my agenda. Well, no, my apologies.
Okay, no, we want to do it correctly, council. Because we appreciate all you do to keep us tracking. So thank you.
It is within the study session component of the board agenda. Since now it's one meeting, the study session distinction is not as critical. So I recommend we hear the presentation first, and then the board will open the public hearing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Justin? Unless David, you wanted to say something.
No, I just handed off to Council Robert Shaw.
Great. So I see many familiar faces from our last public hearing, but in case we have anyone new or for those who are watching the recording afterward, today we will be hearing from demographer Justin Rich of Cooperative Strategies regarding the redistricting process. The College of Marin has a comprehensive webpage where we communicate information about the process, as well as steps undertaken to date and those coming in months ahead. So the link is in the board packet. I would really recommend everyone look at this. The Board of Trustees approved the contract with Cooperative Strategies based on a competitive price for services, recommendation by outside counsel, and Cooperative Strategies experience both within Marin County as well as with other community college districts. So we are happy to be working with Cooperative Strategies in this. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Justin, please, to talk through the process prior to our public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you all see that? Okay. We've got different.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Thank you for having me back twice in 1 month. I'm happy to be with you all. We'll be just going through the same presentation, and I'll be sharing the same overview, the timeline, also some maps and data for benefit of anyone who wasn't able to see this the first time, with the goal of being able to get some input as we embark on the next phase of drawing maps for you all. So just background on the California Voting Rights Act. Local agencies across the state that have an election system where they are elected at large are contemplating making changes, just like you all are. And that's because of the California Voting Rights Act. And the piece from the California Voting Rights Act that we have here is that it prohibits the use of at-large election systems when that system impairs the ability of a protected class to elect the candidates of their choice or their ability to influence the outcome of an election. So this is very much modeled after the Federal Voting Rights Act with some, but it's even more restrictive in certain cases. So that's the background on why you all are considering this. Just real quickly, the three types of election systems are the at-large election system, which is currently used by Marin College. Basically, that's all voters vote for all candidates. The from trustee area election is a system where all voters vote for candidates that must reside in specific areas. That's the from trustee area election. And then finally, the by-trustee-area election system is where voters in specific areas also vote for candidates that are from that same area. And this is the one that is, let's say, most compliant with the California Voting Rights Act. And for a number of reasons that we won't get into here, but having to do with just generally the representation of those voters. Real quickly, I'll turn to the timeline, and we've had this will be the second public hearing. And the intent is to gather information, gather feedback from the public before we even draw any potential maps. And so after we wrap this up, then we'll dive headlong into that map drawing process. We're required to have 2 public hearings, and we haven't set those dates yet, where we will, again, get input and feedback from the community and the board as well, just about those maps before we can adopt a final plan for the district. This is all going to go into effect for the November 2022 election cycle. And so that's the timeliness of this is getting that so that this next election cycle, you'll have elections by trustee area. So there's a number of different.
And Justin, if I may interrupt right there, I just want to be clear that prior slide on the agenda, it does indicate what's TBD would be November 9th and December 14th. Isn't that correct?
Sorry, I don't think we've updated that yet, but yes.
Okay,
that's
thank you.
correct. So as demographers, we have to look at various considerations that go into drawing trustee maps. I categorize these 2 different ways. There are the things that we must do to comply with the law, and there's other things that we should do. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that the areas are roughly balanced in terms of population or total population. It's important to know that that has to do with not just voters, not any group of people. It's based on the total population. So all living persons in that particular area. It doesn't have anything to do with citizenship and all those things, total population. Also, we have to make sure that areas are drawn to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act. And what that means is that we cannot impair the ability of a protected class to elect the candidate of their choice. And in this context, a protected class is a group that's defined by the Federal Voting Rights Act as language and racial minority groups, and making sure that we're not dividing those groups in such a way that it dilutes their influence and that they're not able to have their full voice heard. So as we go through the process, we'll pay attention to the percentages of those protected classes based on citizen voting age population. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the maps in this particular presentation. So the other things that we should do is that we should make areas as compact and contiguous as possible. Now, the shape and the geography of Marin College is obviously, it makes it more difficult to make those compact and contiguous, so we have to take that into consideration. And also there's varying degrees of population density as well. So all those things we have to take into account, but all other things being equal, we want them to be compact and contiguous. We must respect communities of interest as much as possible. Communities of interest are defined as groups with shared social and economic characteristics. Oftentimes those can be neighborhoods or other groups that have that connection. So we want to not divide them when we can avoid that. We should follow man-made and natural geographic features, which I think is intuitive. Oftentimes those can be the boundaries for communities of interest. We should also, when we can, respect incumbency. That shouldn't be a primary consideration, but it can be a consideration. And then finally, there should be other local considerations as well that are pertinent to you all and to your mission. So those are the things that's the lens, I would say, that we view our role when we're drawing maps. We try to keep all of these things in mind. It's a balancing act, frankly. On this slide, we've included the 2020 census data, and we've broken that out by the various protected classes within the district. And it also shows the total population. I should note that we now have some recently released data from the Department of Finance, and that's the data. It will change slightly, and that's the data that we will use in our map drawing process. Most notably, there was a reapportionment of incarcerated persons, and that's relevant for you all based on San Quentin, and so there will be some changes as a result of that. On the next slide, this is the same data, but just with a more zoomed in picture on the map of the various cities and towns that are within the district. I will point out that the largest protected class based on total population is the Hispanic Latino group, and that's roughly 20% of the total population. We also included what we call a graduated color map. And what we've done is we've taken the citizen voting age population for the Hispanic Latino group. And this is meant to be a proxy for those that are likely to vote in an election. And what it indicates is based on census block, which is the building blocks that we use for building these maps. The darker the color, the higher concentration of Latino population, and the lighter the color, the lower concentration. This does not indicate population density. It's simply the percentage of that protected class within each one of those census blocks. Again, we've included a zoomed in version that highlights the tip of the peninsula there as well. I should note that the citizen voting age population is the metric that we use when we're evaluating whether or not we're complying with the Federal Voting Rights Act. This is, we want to look at who's likely to vote in an election as opposed to all the people within an area. And as you'll notice, there are differences in terms of percentage total population versus citizen voting age population, just based on the fact that there's distributions across those groups based on their age and their citizenship status. So really the fundamental question for tonight is how should we draw these maps, and what, as a demographer who does not live in your community, what should I take away and what should we look at when we go and draw those maps? So we've included a couple of aerial pictures here just so that people can orient themselves to where the district is and all the area that it covers. When we zoom in here, we see some of the major roads and highways that are in the district. And that question is, how should we divide this up? And knowing that we have 7 areas, how are we going to draw those areas? So we'd like to give a few different examples of things that are helpful for us as we go through our process. Things like identifying certain neighborhoods that should be in the same trustee area based on those communities of interest, or because there is a connection between those neighborhoods that we should keep in mind. And we don't want to divide them because there is that sort of that shared social fabric. Additionally, if there are particular dividing lines that make sense, Highway 101, Highway 37, ultimately that information is helpful for us. I do think that what's most important here is at the bottom of the slide, we want to draw maps that keep communities together and provide for good representation. So feedback that helps to further that goal, I think, is really important. And that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there will be some, there will be the public hearing as well, and happy to weigh in on anything you would like me to.
Okay, so council, I guess at this point then I open the public hearing, or do you want me to start asking trustees?
Yeah, I would suggest if there are trustee questions, you get those first so that if many members of the public have the same question, they have the benefit of hearing the response. And then we'll go to the public hearing.
Okay, Trustee da Silva.
Thank you. Yes, I have two questions. One is what happens when two of the considerations conflict rather wildly? For example, if you want to make the best district for Hispanic representation, you just take all of those spots that are highlighted with those color tints that you showed in the slide and put them into one district. That would conflict with the other consideration of having contiguous districts. How do you approach that? And the second question is one that I've heard from other people. Will there be a coin toss? This may not be so germane to your work, but maybe our council could help us. So I guess there is a legend out there that once the districts are drawn, there will be a coin toss, and that will determine which districts go up for election in 2022 and which districts go up for election in 2026. Is that right? Anyway, two questions.
So I can answer the first one, and then I see Alicia will help with the other one. You point out a fundamental challenge, I think, in drawing maps that can meet all of those criteria, and that's important for us to keep in mind. Now, I am not an attorney, but the situation that you described where we drew an area in such a way that it captured all of the Latino vote, for instance, there's Supreme Court precedent that says that we can't base it solely on race. So it is a fine line to walk. I think that to the extent that we are doing all of those things reasonably, I think that, first of all, we have to balance population. Second of all, when possible, we should try to draw majority minority districts. And if we can do that without gerrymandering, then we should do that. But we ultimately have to keep that in mind. Alicia, I'm not sure if you want to add on to that.
I don't have anything to add to Trustee da Silva's first question. In terms of the second question, there are a lot of different scenarios that could happen with when certain districts or board trustee areas are up for election. Generally, what districts have done is, again, it's going to have to be even. So 3 board trustee areas during one election cycle, 4 in the other. And so if in 2022, you currently have 4 trustee seats up for re-election, most likely we will take 4 seats up for re-election in 2022. There are only 3, then we may recommend only 3. If the lines are able to be drawn where incumbency ends up being considered, then we will likely recommend, okay, well, these 3 seats are up in 2022. Let's number them so that they're again up in 2022. But it's going to depend on various factors, and if incumbency ultimately can be considered or not. So it's hard to answer that question affirmatively without knowing what these maps are going to look like, but that's how we generally have tried to do it before.
Thank you very much.
Next person I saw was Trustee Conti.
Well, I'm going to wait. Sorry. Are we,
Any other questions from the trustees?
I
Um,
have,
Okay, trustee Long?
I have kind of a sweeping question. I had my news on early this morning and heard the documentation of what was happening during the Palestinian and um, Middle East, Iraq, the whole works. And what people remember about what was being said to set the direction of what it is that we're doing. My concern at midpoint now is what is the goal that we remember every single meeting that we meet, why we're doing what we're doing? I can give my version, but I'd like somebody less objective to give a more global kind of that whatever we do can stand for some years rather than just meeting the compliance issue. So I'd like us always to remember, why are we doing what we're doing? So that when we are making the decisions, it becomes really apparent that we all, 7 of us, agree that that's what we're doing. And I think that during the next weeks and months, it's possible for us to disagree at some point in time or agree. I'd like us to agree and be in unison about what it is that we do. But I want us to keep focused on what is the purpose of the reorganization, what is the purpose of how we go about counting the numbers, and not to be doing omission of what's really important and that what really matters about what it is that we're doing. So I want us to be able to stand tall and high at the end, and we articulate it as a group that this is why we're doing what we're doing. Because I believe that the community right this moment does not know what's happening. And that's pretty evident, even though we put the announcements out and we doing reach, we may have to do more outreach at some point in time, because we will be affecting people's lives, both in education and in community involvement. So I wanted that to be kind of the umbrella by what we're doing, because I don't want us to forget why we're doing what we're doing and to be able to remember it when the heat is on and get the accolades when we're doing a great job. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing that I think we need to be not only assured that what we're doing is the best for the community, and where we disagree, let's hash it out until we come to some agreement about those issues, because they'll bubble out, in time anyway. So thank you for listening to my comments.
Well, Eva, I think that one thing that we will find is that we probably will have more engagement, and probably Justin and Alicia can speak to this as well once some maps are put out there. So the next step for Justin and his team is to really say, okay, here are 7 contiguous districts with equal number of population. And here's what seems likely, given the other considerations that were on the second slide. And I think the reason we're doing it is because we were challenged under the act, and we acquiesced in order to accomplish the goal of the act. We already know, and as Justin has already alluded to, it's not possible in Marin County due to systemic racism and racial covenants that precluded people from living in certain areas, and redlining, that it is not possible in Marin County to do the entire county and have 7 areas and come up with one that has a majority, a minority representation. So the fact of the matter is, the intent perhaps is that there will be greater access. More people will view it as a possibility to run for the office because it will be 1/7 the cost, although it won't break out to 1/7 as we know, but it will be more accessible for more people, and hopefully more people that could represent unrepresented groups. Even though, in my opinion, in my time on the board, we have had a very diverse board And in fact, I think some of the most diverse boards in the county. When you think about, we had an Asian American, a Thai American, a Japanese American, and 2 lesbians all on the board, just, in the same period of time. So that's pretty diverse, if you ask me. But the reality is we're doing this because we're required to do so under the settlement. And I think that the goal of increasing outreach will certainly come, I think, once we've had the maps, as I've indicated. And Justin, perhaps you could elaborate.
Yeah, just 2 points. I think that first of all, you're right. We find that there is more engagement when there's a map there, because then people can react to that. And I think that just asking that, that's the reason why we put those prompts in there, and in terms of our presentation, because it's really it's really abstract to think about those things just on their own. And I think once you see a map, there's things that you will notice, and you as community members will notice that, hey, this doesn't make sense for this reason. And that's really helpful for us. And then we can go back and draw different scenarios that address those issues. And then the second thing I think is we're working right now to put up a tool that will allow people to draw their own maps and to submit that information to us. So that's a nice tool to, be able to take that into consideration and see if there's other options that make more sense. So I do think the community's voice will be heard, both through the public hearings that are forthcoming, and their ability to weigh directly in on the maps that we draw. So.
Thank you.
Okay, I also, Council Robinshaw.
Yes, thank you. I just want to add quickly, we also are accepting comments in Spanish. We're encouraging comments to be left in English and Spanish through our webpage, where we have a dedicated way to submit comments particular to this issue that would be shared with the board as other correspondence to the board. And I just want to remind the board of the resolution from March of 2020. Okay, sorry. End of the school day here. The resolution from March 2020, where the board, it's resolution 2020-03, where the board outlined the specific reasons to take this measure, along with some of what Trustee Trainer just reminded us. Thank you, and apologies for that interruption.
No, tell her we hope she had a good day of school today. And also I want to welcome Aaron Adis, I think is your last name. He's a junior at Redwood High School, and he's writing a paper about what we're doing, and he chose the topic. So welcome, Aaron. It's good to see you, and I'm glad you're able to join us. I saw Trustee Cont and then Trustee Crow.
Okay, I have a question about the timing or the process for deciding which districts come up first. I don't really understand. I didn't really ever assume that that was all up for grabs or could be a coin toss. We have 3 people whose terms run out in 2022. So if one of those districts wasn't selected, then there would be a vacancy on the board.
So if you, okay, I'm sorry if I explained it clearly. If there are 3 districts up for re-election, or if there are 3 seats up for re-election in 2022, there are going to be 3, there are most likely going to be 3 seats up for election in 2022. What will get complicated is, let's say there are 2 board seats right now where the incumbent trustees live incredibly close to each other. And so there is no way within the confines of the law, the California Voting Rights Act, Federal Voting Rights Act, to draw lines so that the two incumbents are in separate districts. Because again, while incumbency can be considered, it can't be a primary factor. So you have to consider the other factors are going to have to weigh more heavily. And so if two of those seats, for example, let's say one of those incumbents is up in 2022 and the other is up in 2024, then there may have to be a vacancy, and there's going to have to be a decision about when to put the seat that encompasses, you know, those two incumbencies up. It's hard to explain without showing you examples and potentially showing you outlines. I'm happy to prepare some scenarios in preparation for the third board meeting, but there are scenarios where someone may have to vacate their seat early because of redrawing the lines, or there may have to be a decision where you're going to have to add a fourth seat up for election in 2022, even if the seat would have been up in 2024. I'm sorry if I'm not explaining that fully. It's hard without examples.
Yeah,
I think Mia has something to add.
I can appreciate that it's incredibly complicated, and we're talking theoretical and hypothetical, so it's probably as far as you can go. But I thought there was something that said people were allowed to complete their terms regardless.
Which is why we generally, we're trying, and Justin can add, but that's why as much as possible, we're not going to tell a board member whose seat is up in 2024, you have to run in 2022. But there may be a few scenarios, and I think they're going to be unlikely scenarios, where we're going to have to weigh some options to figure out which seats are up for election.
So let's
if an incumbent, and I think Mia has something to add.
Yeah, if I could chime in here, I have part of, as Alicia said, there are a lot of possible scenarios, so it's hard to say in the abstract, but generally I think the question will turn on if, you know, if there are not incumbents in the same district, then this is all a non-issue, because we wouldn't have this issue of and terms ending different times or the same times or whatnot. And I think the law does allow for, as has been discussed, it's not a primary consideration, but we can respect the wishes of the voters as a consideration in this process. So voters have voted our current trustees into office. We should not go disregarding that. It's just a matter of how we stagger that with the other considerations. So if we do have two incumbents in one trustee area, the possibilities would be, and the terms are up at the same time, people could run against one another, uncomfortable as that may be, or one person might decide not to run, or somebody may decide. That would mean if we have two in one area, that means we have an area with nobody as an incumbent, right? So I find this very unlikely, but conceivably somebody could relocate, move to the area where we have no incumbent. As I said, I find that unlikely, but possible.
And more likely than not, what would happen is you're going to have a seat without it. Yeah, what I'm echoing what Mia said, you're more likely to have a seat without an incumbent. That is going to be the issue, that two incumbents are going to merge into one. There's going to be a trustee area without an incumbent, and then that becomes an open seat.
So
if they are on staggered terms, so somebody's up in 2022 and somebody is up in 2024, my understanding is that in general, this would be part of a discussion, I think, if we were at a map with these particulars and we're trying to sort out what's up for election when, but somebody could basically, their term would end and that district would not be up for election until the second incumbent in that district's term also ended. So somebody could serve out their term and then basically sit out for 2 years and then run again when that district is up for election.
Well, let's
And-
use the example. I mean, the one that's more likely is myself and Paul, right? I mean, we're probably closer and we're two different, well, we're good. We have two different cycles. Like I'm 22, he's 24. So if I chose to run and we're in the same district, what happens to Paul?
Did you say you're 22 and he's 24? I believe, but I would really want us to do this analysis properly.
Which is what we're asking so that we know and we get into it. Yeah.
Yeah,
These
So-
are issues for the next meeting.
yes. So please, especially those watching a recording, this legal analysis has not been completed. But what could happen is your term would be up in 2022. Paul's would continue to 2024. In 2024, there would be an election where you could
Okay.
return to run against Paul.
Okay.
Trustee da Silva, excuse me.
Or there could be a scenario where I hate to use a specific with the two.
Well,
of you,
no, but I
that's-
just
that's
thought
the
there's
example.
one that,
There could be a scenario, just hypothetically, that Paul would step down and run for in 2022 for that seat and compete with Wendy, correct?
Mhm.
But then we'd have a vacancy. Or we're not, well, no, assuming you're in the same thing. So it changes the whole cycle of things. So people who had, people who were on 4-year term, that we had 3 and 4, and it sounds like things are going to get switched around could get switched around on because of redistricting. So then people, I think, are allowed to fill out their terms. So I don't think we need to take it further right now. I get how complicated it is.
Yes, and we can certainly follow up. We have done the analysis and have kind of the more abstract what would happen, but once we have the draft maps, we could look, particularly as some draft maps rise to be more lead contenders, we can definitely have these discussions in more concrete terms. Let me put it that way.
okay, Diana, are you done?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Crowe.
Mine is more simple. That was really complex going there. I just wanted to say that we had Mr. Rich and his company do the redistricting for the city of Novato. And to pick up on Ava's question, once there were maps, they put out some suggested maps to begin with. There was incredible community interest in that. And a number of people submitted maps, and there was a lot of talk online and everything about how you drew it and what, and it was sort of exciting to watch people get involved in doing that. And the city council meetings were well attended and discussed. So I don't think that there is going to be a dearth of public interest in this matter as we get closer.
Right. Any other trustee comments, questions? I think just, I appreciate that we were able to I see Trustee da Silva, please. Mhm.
Just have one observation, sort of thinking about the educational implications of the question that was put in as a hypothetical question to solicit feedback. And that is, what types of geographical features divide us? And what types of geographical features unite us? This would be a great springboard topic for geography classes, for example, or maybe all types of other classes. So I was thinking about roads. Historically, roads united us. And if we think about, say, 4th Street in San Rafael or say San Anselmo Avenue, people walk across them all the time, shop on one side, then go to the other side. On the other hand, when the freeways came in, the big freeways, they tended to divide communities. And the same could be said of natural features. Rivers and streams sometimes divide areas, but if there are bridges over them or people take boats across them, then they can actually unite different sides of the same valley. Ridge lines generally tend to divide people, but those who are in good physical condition go over them and down the other side. So it's just kind of interesting to think about what is it, what are the features that divide us and what are the features that unite us?
Thank you.
Transportation would be one.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But
and I think the specific of what divides us and what unites us is really why we were having the prior conversation, because we're working well together as a board, and this is going to change some of the dynamics for us and kind of put us in a little different situation. And I think it's important that we push the envelope a little and find out what's going on, because it's really the voters elected each one of us in a certain period of time. And we want to honor that as well, without focusing on the incumbent's area as much as not diffusing or diminishing the value of the vote taken that put us into office. And I think it just takes work for all of us. And I appreciate that we're willing to work together and to work through this and get to the right result for the community. Let's see, Trustee Cranenberg, did you have any questions? Trustee Long started us out. Is there any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, then at this point, I do open the public hearing, correct, council? And see if the public has any questions or comments.
Yes, the board should please act now to open the public hearing.
Okay,
So
so I'll
we
pretend I
need a
have a
motion.
gavel, right? And the public hearing just opened, is that
I would suggest a motion to
okay?
open the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Conti, second by Long. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crow. Trustee da Silva. He raises his hand, he's on mute. Trustee
Aye.
Cranenberg,
Aye.
trustee Long,
I,
trustee Conti, aye, trustee Trainer.
Aye. All right, any members of the public, including staff, if you have any questions? No? And welcome from the League of Women Voters from Marin. Good to see you.
Just a comment, I think given the complexity of some of these scenarios, I think we'll get them written out so that we can all have them in writing to be able to see. Because I know it takes all of us a little different time to wrap our heads around this stuff, so.
Well, and I think it's an interesting issue, the part about we might have 3 up in 22, but we may end up voting for 4. If we have an area that doesn't have a representative is what it sounds like. So there'd be a flip that we would be, 22 would be the 4 seat and 24 would be a 3 seat.
And
Which I hadn't thought of that before.
I will prepare, if the board would like me to, I can prepare some slides before the next public hearing with a few scenarios that can be presented to the board.
It sounds like a good idea. People nodding, it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out.
Mhm, mhm.
And they're trying to figure it out in a vacuum at this point, so.
Well, and Paul's comment about flipping a coin, I do know that there is a section in the elections code that when a literal tie happens, that's really what does happen is a coin flip. And that's codified, but I hadn't heard that it might be the case for redistricting as well. It makes sense. Maybe Justin, you could tell us some of the worst case scenarios at some point.
Yeah, I would say, number one, you get to serve out your term, does not shorten any term. Number two, there is some discretion and the board ultimately will approve what that election sequencing looks like. There are innumerable ways that you could do it. But I think that there are some that make more sense than others to, accomplish the goal of not having certain areas vacant for a period of time. After all, you're making this transition in order to have by area representation. So I think Alicia has her work cut out for us, but I think that she's absolutely right. I mean, we could, there's so many different potential scenarios, and until you actually have some, it's very hard to say exactly how you might approach each one. There have been, certainly we've had 2 trustees in the same area, sometimes 3. But that's those, you ultimately, that's part of the decision making, I think, in terms of choosing an area that's that disruptive to the current board membership. I mean, that's a consideration as well.
Also, the part for in the county itself, and this was something that President Kuhn and I talked about at some point. There was reference to the MCOE board, but their division is different. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. So they do serve a different area than the college does. They serve areas that are joint unified school districts that cross over into Sonoma County. So they have more population that they serve. So it's not dramatically more, but they do serve different areas. The other thing I would point out is that while for a county office of education, it's very, it's typical, and I think it's actually in the education code as well, that to the extent you want to take into consideration the K-12 boundaries. I'm not sure how strong of a consideration that is for you all. It may represent one of the communities of interest, but that is a really important one for them. And so you'll see that their lines follow fairly closely to what the K-12 boundary lines are.
And then just my own curiosity, I think, is also with the Latino population, Latinx population being 17–18%. No matter what we do, was I correct earlier when I said it's not possible within the county to create a contiguous parcel that would be minority majority?
I don't want to presuppose that. I think that you're pointing out the fact that it would be very difficult. And so we will look at different ways of, again, the way we draw the areas to see if there's, by including certain census blocks and excluding census blocks, I think that might change the dynamic. But I don't think that you would get to a minority majority district just based on the pure percentages. That doesn't mean we won't try. And I think that, the way that other public agencies may view this is that this is the first step. And as that population grows over time, perhaps there are higher concentrations, and they will, eventually reach that level. But it's also important to note that you're going to be revisiting this 10 years from now. And so this isn't locked in perpetuity. This is something that you will have to revisit and look at those considerations again in the future.
And I think that goes to Trustee Long's point about we're taking the long view here because, like that? Okay. Because the long view, did you get that, Eva?
I did.
Okay, got it. All right. So the part about, we are doing this for 10 years. And if the county and the various jurisdictions do what they're supposed to do under the housing laws that have been recently approved, there will be a change in concentration of certain areas as well, and presumably might bring in some more diversity. But there'll be a very different map when we look in 10 years, if any of the building gets done that needs to be done. I don't know, Aaron, as a public hearing member, do you have anything you want to say about what you think about the public process? Is it working? A young person having an interest in this, we appreciate it. So tell us what you think. We can't hear you. You're muted. Oh, or your volume's down.
Yeah. He was off mute, but I think his volume was down.
Okay. Well, we're glad you're here, Aaron. Oh, there you go. Is this gonna work? Huh.
He says he thinks his microphone is
Wait,
broken.
is it working now?
Oh, yeah, no, we can hear you.
Okay. I think it's definitely good that you guys are having the meetings, that the meetings are being held. And I think that I don't really know too much about this yet. I'm still in the learning phase. I'm still learning. So I don't really think I have enough knowledge on the topic to make an informed statement on, or I don't know. I can't think of the right word at the moment. It's kind of escaping me. But I feel like it's definitely important that you guys are having the meetings, and I just want to thank you for having them. This is definitely good.
Good.
Well, we're glad you're there, and just keep involved in the political system and attend other public hearings, and we welcome you to come to future meetings. So thank you
Thank
for being here. Anne, please.
Could I make a suggestion for Aaron for learning more about redistricting? Go to the League of Women Voters of Marin County's website. We have a whole section on local redistricting, tons of information.
You got that, Aaron? League of Women Voters, Marin. Okay, thank you, Anne. Anyone else?
If I can just make one comment about the timeline, I know that there have been some questions posed in the past. Trustee Trainer, you referenced the settlement, and Mia referenced the motion from last year. And in that motion, the board made a commitment to complete this process in time for the November 2022 election. There is a lot that has to happen between now and November 2022 in order for the maps to be in the county system and for names to be put on ballots and everything. So it's these 4 hearings. And then once the board votes on the maps, the district has to submit the maps to the California Community College District Board of Governors, and the Board of Governors under the Education Code has to vote to approve the maps. That all takes time. Once the Board of Governors votes on the maps will, be approved through the Chancellor's office, and then they have to be submitted to the county. And Justin may know this process a little bit more than me, but my understanding is they have to be put into a GIS system, and the lines actually have to be redrawn in order within sufficient time for ballots to be printed. So even though we have a November 2022 election, ballots are printed before November 2022. And so I just want to remind the board members and members of the public that this is a longer process than just these 4 public hearings. And that is why we have started before the census data has been verified, and why the board is having the November and December meetings as the 3rd and 4th public hearings, so that very early on in 2022, we can get the rest of the approval process started, and this can be in place in accordance with the board's commitment that it made last year.
Yeah, you were talking about using the GIS shapefile. So we will take the files that we prepare that go into each one of the maps, and based on the one that is selected, we will share that with the county registrar of voters. We're going to redraw precincts based on that. And so they have to look at all of the different public agencies that are holding elections, and they have to, draw those precincts accordingly so that there's not people that are in one and out of the other for each precinct. They're all contained within that, that same block. And so that's the complication, is that they need enough time to be able to meet all of their timelines, in terms of ballot arguments and candidate statements and all of those sorts of things. So they need a lot of lead time to do that. And, that's generally 6 months in advance of that election that those things need to be wrapped up.
But using the example of MCOE with 7 districts, we could have we would still have the same precincts, and the precincts have to be the same, but we might not have the same precincts in the area.
Yeah, you may have some shared precincts, but if your boundaries are different, you will have precincts that aren't the same, right? And they're because they'll cut through those and in certain spots. And so each ballot is customized to, all of the candidates, measures, and things like that are unique to that group of people.
So, but all precincts will be defined once the districts are, not our district, but for the county, all the precincts will be defined and consistent before we finalize the map?
No.
No. Oh, wow. Huh.
The thing is that each individual precinct can take in a number of different ballot types. You see, I mean, the county has like an average like 22 different ballots in any election, because there are people who can only vote in the county elections in each cities and different school districts. So it really is immaterial. They need our information in order to figure out who is on which ballot they get. But it has nothing really to do with the precincts as such. So,
Alicia, did you have something you wanted to add?
Nope.
Mia has put both the information about the League of Women Voters website as well as the college website, Aaron, for your link to get as much information as possible. Anyone else have any other comments, questions?
One question I have is, let's say we pass all the goalposts that we need to achieve for this go around. So let's say 10 years rolls around and there's not any improvement on diversity and ethnicity, as well as balancing the district areas. Can you forecast anything about what will happen in the future? And that's probably Mr. Rich.
So it's a good question. I think there's no requirement that you redraw maps just for the sake of redrawing maps. If you're still 10 years from now, if your population is balanced, you can keep the same map that you adopt during this process. So the map may look the same, and we have clients that aren't going to change their boundaries because population hasn't changed enough to throw things out of balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so certainly you could just keep the same map that you have, again, as long as your population is balanced, and those other criteria are still valid considerations each time. But you're required to look at it and do an assessment and determine whether or not you're still in compliance.
But it's a self evaluation.
Yeah, it's a self-evaluation. If you were out of population balance, I suppose that there could be legal recourse. If you were out of balance and you just decided to keep your boundaries as is. Well,
it's like even what's happened with District 4 in the county, that it keeps getting more and more of Novato. And that's the part where that's a pure population issue. And so for us, we have to do our due diligence before the 10 years is up to see what the new data is from the, 2030 census, and then be able to be comfortable that we don't need to do anything else. But as we've learned from our council in the previous meeting, we are least vulnerable to litigation if we go to area elections in order to be in compliance with the act. So we're doing the most that we can, but we also don't give up. We still need to look at things in the future. Trustee Crow.
No, I was just going to point out what you said. For the Board of Supervisors, they end up making minor changes every 10 years. And it's, hacking off more and more in Novato.
We'll look
Okay.
forward to hearing from the incumbents in 2030, right, to see how it goes. So.
Well, let's hope that we're still around to find out. That's the goal. Any other, at this point, seeing no other hands or comments, I will take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Crow, second by Cranenberg. There we go. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crow.
Aye.
Trustee da Silva.
Aye.
Trustee Cranenberg.
Aye.
Trustee Long.
Aye.
Trustee Conti, aye. Trustee Craner.
Aye, thank you very much. The calendar of events indicate the two dates for the next hearings, as I commented when Justin had the slide up. At the moment, those are our two scheduled board meetings. November 9th and December 14th is our organizational meeting. So the trustees should already have that on your calendar. If for some reason it doesn't work or we have too many items on that agenda, we certainly will be getting notices out as soon as we can. I just think for Ann and Aaron, if you just make sure to get the November 9th and December 14th, or those 2 dates that are likely our next 2 hearings once we have the map. And again, it's not set in stone, but maybe put them in your calendar so that it's there. It may well be that when we have the maps, we decide we need to have a separate meeting. We'll just see how it plays out. But we do have, as Alicia said, a timeline in which to complete the work. So this work will be done in this year is the goal. Upcoming board meetings, we know we have one in October. Officers will be meeting next Tuesday, so the following Tuesday. If there's any items or issues, please let officers know. And I want to thank Justin and Alicia and Mia, Nikki, everyone that makes it possible for us to be able to move through this work together, and that it's a challenging time. And I want to thank the trustees for our commitment to do this together and to ask the hard questions and to be willing to work through what we have to work through and know that we're doing it for the students and we're doing it for greater representation. And it's our job to do it, and we're going to do it well together. So I want to thank you for the commitment we're making together to make this right. With that, is there anything else, Dr. Kuhn, you wanted to add, or? Mia,
At this
no?
point, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Will
Yes,
we
thank
see you,
you.
Mia, October meeting?
I hope so.
Okay. But you may not have control over that. I got that. Okay, but I mean, just to wish you well, whatever, so that you know we care and we send you support.
Thank you. And for now, we will go ahead and update the redistricting page with those dates, but Mickey, let's note that they are, tentative just in case, but we can post those. And for Aaron's benefit, part of the reason for the rush is the census data was significantly delayed this year. We had planned to start this process many months ago, but we just didn't have the census data. So we're trying to make up for
And the
something.
census data was delayed because of the COVID and people couldn't get out and do the census. And so it was a cast of characters that came down on us, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's it. All right,
Thank
so
you.
then please remember that we're going to adjourn in memory of Tom Place, who was a 30-year faculty member who recently passed away. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, I got Cranenberg and Long seconded, I think. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crow,
Aye.
Trustee da Silva,
Aye.
Trustee Cranenberg,
Aye.
Trustee Long,
Aye.
Trustee Conti, aye, Trustee Trainer.
Aye. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your evening, and thank you for all the work you all do. Appreciate it.
Bye,
Take good
everybody.
care.